Lantern light on the slow line. The train waited like a slow, breathing thing beneath the pale hush of evening. Its lanterns already burned along the platform, small bowls of amber light swinging in the hands of the attendants. They painted soft, warm circles on the wood and on the faces of the few passengers who moved slowly across the boards. Mira stepped up onto the carriage with a sketchbook tucked beneath her arm. She wore a thin coat the color of late oats and carried a small satchel of pencils and a few treasured erasers. The world had smoothed itself into gentle tones of lavender and blue. The hills beyond the platform looked like folded paper, each ridge a quiet suggestion rather than a sharp line. She found a seat by the window and settled in. The cushions were the old, kind of fabric that remembered many journeys. The carriage smelled faintly of oil and wood, and a cleanness that came from people folding themselves into small moments. A lantern on the wall near the steps gave a steady, round glow. It was a small circle of warmth that repeated through the carriage, and Mira noticed how it softened the edges of everything inside. She found a seat by the window and settled in. The cushions were the old, kind of fabric that remembered many journeys. The carriage smelled faintly of oil and wood, and a cleanness that came from people folding themselves into small moments. A lantern on the wall near the steps gave a steady, round glow. It was a small circle of warmth that repeated through the carriage, and Mira noticed how it softened the edges of everything inside. She opened her sketchbook and let the first line fall. At first she drew the far ridge exactly as she saw it, a thin, wavy mark meant to hold the curve of the land. Then she drew the nearer trees, the slender, dark suggestions of branches. Her pencil moved quick, quiet, almost eager. She wanted to keep what daylight had left. She wanted to gather it and carry it home. The train moved before the sky fully emptied. It began as a familiar, slow lurch and then a steady hum. The rhythm was small and constant, wheels and rail, breath and hush. The carriage swayed gently as the train took its track, a small rocking that matched the beating of a calm heart. Mira felt the sway in the base of her hand, in the soft press of her feet against the floor. She kept sketching. Outside, the hills flowed under the window as if a soft hand were tending a long, slow cloth. Fields folded, hedges became thin seams, a distant house a faint rectangle. The light thinned, shadows lengthened into one another, colors blurred into a hush of dusky tones. Mira's pencil grew busier, racing against the way the world was losing itself into night. Her lines multiplied. She sketched a tree, then a field, then a leaning fence. She shaded until the page grew warm with graphite. She tried to press every small thing into the book, the last witness to a day that would not stay. Her breathing tightened. The lantern glow on the wall near her seat seemed to shrink as the outside darkened. The small circle of light she had noticed at the carriage door repeated in the reflections of the window. Lantern glow and the train's rhythm folded together in the glass. A new kind of worry came then, quiet but present. Mira felt as if she were chasing the light with a net. The pencil felt heavy with intent. She imagined waking the next morning and finding the hills gone from her page, their memories smudged by sleep. She tried to sketch faster. Her hand tugged. The drawings grew small and hurried. Rowan passed through the carriage on his rounds. He wore the conductor's coat, soft at the edges from many years of work, and his badge caught the lantern light with a subdued gleam. He knew the slow line well. He knew which bridges sighed a little more, which stretches of track made the carriage settle deeper into its cushions. He saw Mira across the aisle, her brow drawn slightly inward, the pencil moving as if it were trying to keep a fleeing bird. He paused a breath away and leaned gently on the back of the seat beside her. He kept his voice low as if the train might sleep if startled. "Evening," he said. His voice was a warm note, steady as the rail beneath them. He looked at her sketchbook with a kind, unhurried curiosity. Mira gave him a small, quick smile and closed the book a fraction. "I want to catch it all," she said, "before it goes away." Rowan's eyes softened under the lantern glow. He nodded toward the window. "It will go," he said, "but the going is part of it." He tapped the side of the carriage where a lantern had been fastened. Its light pooled in the wood like set honey. "Listen to the rhythm while you draw. Let the train measure the pace." Mira glanced at him and then back to the shaking landscape. The suggestion sounded almost like permission. She breathed in, feeling the air of the carriage move with them. The train's soft hum filled the small space between them. She watched the lantern light on the far wall, how it made a soft coin of warmth that did not hunger for detail. It repeated in the windows, faint and patient. The motif settled in her chest, lantern glow and steady rhythm, like a small, steady lantern itself. She turned her page and laid the pencil down without pressing. She listened. The train hummed, wheels brushed rails with a simple, repeating sound. The sway came in as a gentle metronome. Mira felt her hand slow on the paper. The hurried line softened into a longer, more thoughtful gesture. She let the rhythm count each stroke. Instead of trying to fit every tree and fence, she looked for the way the hills folded, for the manner in which dusk pooled in the hollows. She watched how the lantern glow made the cushions look rounder, how it made the small metal latch on the window shine like a tiny moon. She drew not the exact leaf, but the suggestion of leaves in the dark, the soft weight of shadow where a field had been. Sometimes she followed the sway. When the carriage tipped, her pencil arced with it, making a curved line that felt like a slow breath. When the train steadied, she held a quieter mark, smaller and calm. The page became a record of movement as much as of sight. Rowan moved on with a soft step. He checked tickets with low, pleasant words and smiled easily at the people who dozed in their seats. He kept the lanterns trimmed and the little brass handles polished. He returned later with a cup of tea warmed just enough and set it on the small table between the seats without crowding her space. The steam lifted in a thin, curling line and disappeared in the lantern light. Mira took a sip and felt warmth thread into her fingers. The coach kept its slow, reliable course. Outside, the hills became darker masses. The sky deepened to a velvet blue. Stars began to gather like small pinpricks, careful and patient. The train's windows framed them in rectangles, and the lantern glow inside made the stars feel like complimentary guests. Sometimes a light from a farmhouse would blink and wink, then settle again. Mira would make a small dot on the page and leave the rest around it open. The sketch turned inwards. It began to hold space. Where once she had tried to fill every corner, she now invited the quiet between the marks to speak. The gaps were not empty so much as held. They breathed with the room. Rowan checked again and stayed a silent while. He stood by the doorway, watching the countryside slide by, lantern glow catching the line of his coat like a soft halo. He waited until Mira looked up. Then he said, as if naming the moment, you don't need to finish to keep it. She thought of all the things that wanted completion, the list of errands at home, the habit of tying each thought to a tidy ending. The pencil hovered, then rested. "What will happen to the parts I don't draw?" she asked, voice thin as the steam from her cup. "They're still there," Rowan said, "and some parts are better left to be remembered. Memory and feeling carry what sight cannot always hold. The train keeps everything moving so gently you can let some of it go and still arrive with the whole of it inside you." Mira turned the page. She sketched a long, lazy line that suggested the ridge of a hill. She drew another, softer line for the valley. She shaded where the lantern glow had made the inside corner of her seat feel like a small harbor. She began to see that the hills sang different when she set her pencil to the rhythm rather than to a hurried chase of shapes. The motif of lantern glow and rhythm returned in a small way each time she lifted her eyes. The lantern light warmed the edges of a sleeping child's blanket. It formed a halo around a man's folded hands. It made the brass of a button gentle to look at. The rhythm kept them all in time. It paced the carriage like a lullaby that knew the right moments to breathe and the quiet moments to hold. Outside, the detail thinned until all the hills were a single, rolling idea. The trees pared back to dark lines. A hedgerow became a soft seam. Mira traced the seam, not as a list of leaves, but as a shadowed suggestion with the steady measure of the rails. She let her pencil rest more between marks. The page grew quieter. She found herself smiling with a small, surprised ease. She had come expecting a record, a tally of what had been. Instead, she was finding the feeling of moving through dusk. The light that had worried her before, so brief and unforgiving, now worked with her. The lantern glow inside and the stars outside married into a gentle duet. The motif hummed like a small song she could hum in her head. The carriage slowed at a tiny station. The doors opened to let a cool breath of night in. A few passengers stepped down into the thin light, their silhouettes brief and private. A family reunited in a slow, careful way, voices soft as they kissed each other goodnight. The train took them in, lanterns steady, then moved on again. Mira watched the small scene through the doorway and then back to her page. The sketch had become an accumulation of soft truths rather than a catalogue of facts. She had not drawn every tree. She had instead suggested the space where trees might be and the way dusk gathered in their arms. Her hand found a last small flourish. It was not hurried. It echoed the rhythm of the rails and the lantern glow, and it felt like stitching a seam into cloth that would be worn and loved. She closed the sketchbook a little while later, the cover falling shut with a quiet, satisfied weight. Rowan came by to collect the passing tickets. He took them gently and smiled as he saw the closed book. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Full," she said. The word was small and honest. He nodded, as if he understood how the world folds into modest shapes. The train hummed on. The lanterns kept their steady light. The hills beyond the window were now a dark, companionable ribbon, and the stars above were patient watchers. Mira tucked her sketchbook into her satchel and leaned back into the cushion. The sway of the carriage rocked her in a slow, steady way. The lantern glow kept the inside of the coach in a soft, familiar circle. The motif had done its work. It had met the worry and made a path through it. She watched the window where the reflection of the lantern overlapped the black of the hills. For a moment, both the inside light and the outside dark were visible in a single place. The image was simple, almost like a secret the carriage kept for those who looked closely. In that overlap, she felt both the world she had tried to hold and the one that would continue to be held by memory. Other passengers slept in small, even breaths. The boy leaned against his father's shoulder and murmured until he drifted into sleep. An old woman read a small book by the lantern's glow and then closed it with a patient hand. A couple spoke in whispers about a place they would visit tomorrow. The train was full of small, contained worlds moving forward together. Mira thought of the places her lines might visit beyond the page. She imagined the drawings sleeping inside her bag, their graphite soft and secure. She imagined returning to them another morning and finding new thoughts beside them, like small notes left by a friend. The thought pleased her. Rowan walked the aisle one last time before he would take a rest. He straightened a cushion here and there, adjusted a lantern, and made sure the little brass latch on the door clicked quietly. He paused where Mira sat and watched the carriage with an ease that had learned to find beauty in moving slowly rather than in holding still. When the train reached its next gentle slope, it leaned into the evening with a soft confidence. The lantern seemed content to shine on. The rhythm hummed steady and low, a compact, kindly metronome. Mira listened to it until the sound became a part of her breathing. The page she had made held its own quiet. She felt as if she had wrapped the dusk in paper and tucked it close. By the time the slow line threaded through the last modest valley of the night, the carriage had settled into a soft sleep. The lanterns glowed in steady circles. The rhythm counted the way forward like a promise. Mira slept then, the sketchbooks safe in her lap, her head leaning against the cushion. Her breathing matched the sway. The long, low rhythm of the train and the repeating lantern glow had taught her what she needed to know. That not finishing could be a way of keeping something whole. The world did not vanish without her pencil proof. It simply moved into memory, and that memory was a gentle, living place. The train continued its slow and careful way through the night. Outside, the hills rested under the wide, patient sky. Inside, the lantern glow repeated along the carriage like a row of small stars. The motif kept its soft company with those who traveled, softening edges and timing the breath. When morning arrived, it would bring new lines and new days. For now there was only the hush, the warmth of the lanterns and the low, steady song of the rails.